I always like to address basic human anatomy. Now, there are various presentations of the male and female bodies, but also intersex. So, not all bodies look this way. However, these are the parts on the majority of human bodies. Welcome to the Sexuality Clinic podcast, designed to help you deepen emotional and physical connections, prioritize your pleasure, and build stronger, more intimate relationships. Hosted by Canadian clinical sexologist Roxana Smallwood. That's me. This show offers a shame-free space for candid, science-backed discussions on sexual health, body literacy, anatomy, self-exploration, and relationships, both solo and partnered. Whether you're seeking to better understand your body, explore your desires, or communicate your sexual needs with confidence, each episode provides actionable tips and expert insights that empower you to take control of your sexual expression. From understanding the nuances of intimacy and pleasure to building healthier, more fulfilling relationships, this podcast is your go-to guide for all things sex and connection. Ready to prioritize your pleasure and start building the intimate life you deserve? Tune in now, and don't forget to download my free checklist or join the waitlist for my online course. You can also book to see me online or in person. I reside in Vancouver, BC, Canada. Subscribe today and start your journey toward more confident, connected, and pleasurable relationships. All right, so welcome back to the Sexuality Clinic podcast, exploring pleasure and relationships. I'm your host, Roxana Smallwood, clinical sexologist and passionate advocate for shame-free, pleasure-centered sexual wellness. Today, I'd like to go through a brief introduction to my business, the Sexuality Clinic. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. We're going to go into a few slides that I've created for events that I take part in. And I figured might as well go ahead and present to my own audience. I don't have to always do my introduction elsewhere. Here we have it. So let's just dive right in to an introduction to the Sexuality Clinic. If you're not watching, know that you can watch along with these slides. My podcast is available with video on Spotify or on YouTube. You can search the Sexuality Clinic and choose my podcast playlist with video. I believe there's an audio-only version as well that automatically populates when I upload on Spotify. So here's a quick little welcome and introduction. So I help clients embrace pleasure without shame and strengthen relationships through communication and self-awareness. My work focuses on anatomy, self-exploration, and fostering intimacy with oneself and with others. So whether through private sessions, seminars, or podcasts, I guide people toward embracing pleasure and creating fulfilling relationships. So I have studied quite a bit. You can see on the photograph here, I've got an undergraduate degree in human biology. I've got a master's degree in education with a focus on adult learning and technology. And then I've completed a sex coaching program. I've also completed the coursework portion of my PhD. So I am a board certified clinical sexologist. And I'm just about, one more is that I have a certification in sexuality and disabilities. And that is a part of my PhD program where I will be going into a dissertation that will focus on sexual and relationship satisfaction in autistic neurodiverse relationships. I myself am in an autistic neurodiverse relationship. I have been for 15 years, and I didn't realize that was the case until probably about 5 years ago. So realizing the differences in autistic neurodiverse relationships versus allistic relationships has been eye-opening. And while my focus is on autistic neurodiverse relationships, I believe that that can apply to every relationship because the main focus for somebody who is on the autism spectrum is when I see them is that we talk about clear communication and strategies so that we're not left expecting that our partner might be a mind reader or that we're following some invisible book or a book that only autistic people have access to on how to communicate and be social and express needs, concerns, and desires. So one of the main themes of my work is that sexuality is part of the human experience and it belongs to everyone. It doesn't need to look a certain way. So, an upcoming offering that I plan to have locally here in Vancouver, BC, will be a sexuality social. So, might start as a twice monthly social learning experience exploring sexuality, relationships, and connection for all abilities. This will be an in-person offering where all bodies, minds, and abilities are included in conversations about sexuality, intimacy, and relationships. Each gathering will feature an educational topic, a guided discussion by me, and then time to connect with others in a supportive and inclusive environment. So, this will be for people who are willing to learn something new, they want to meet like minded people, and they're interested in building meaningful connections. So, inclusive sexuality education and community for curious minds of all abilities is something I'm very passionate about. So, if you'd like more information about this, please drop me a line, send me an email, message me on whatever platform we're on right now connecting, and I will be sure to add you to the information waitlist. So I'll keep in touch. It is important to note that when it comes to human sexuality, each person's experiences and practices and desires are unique. We are not to be comparing ourselves to what is so-called normal. Normal is a setting on a washing machine, okay? We do not need to be striving for normal. We want to be striving for our authentic expression of ourselves. So, what I typically cover with clients goes generally in this order is that we start with some anatomy and body literacy. We talk a little bit about unlearning and relearning their sex ed so as to hopefully reduce any shame that might be associated with sexuality. Then we talk about self-exploration and pleasure before we discuss building intimate relationships. And so we'll do a little bit of an overview in this session right now, but it's going to be rather brief. So if you'd like to go into any of those topics with me in a private session, or if you'd like to attend another way, maybe an event or a webinar, then again, reach out or head on over to the sexualityclinic.com, my website, so that you can book in. I do 15-minute complimentary consultations as well, so you can get a sense of whether or not we might be a good match for working together. Now, I always like to address basic human anatomy. Now, there are various presentations of the male and female bodies, but also intersex. So, not all bodies look this way. However, these are the parts on the majority of human bodies. I do focus a little more in these images on the female bodied individual only because it was so heavily missed in textbooks until recent years. There's somebody by the name of Jessica Ann Pinn who has been advocating for the inclusion of clitoral drawings. So I have a little 3D clitoris model that you can take a look at here. It um, sort of has this little glands here at the top, which you can see in the slide just here. And then we've got the legs that attach to the bone. And then we've got these two bulbs. Now, the bulbs can be felt externally. You can use a little bit of a lubricated hand to explore. But I just want to point out that the clitoris is more than the glands. And in fact, it almost resembles like It looks quite similar to what a penis would look like anatomically, just in a bit of a different shape. And sure enough, if you didn't receive that hormone wash, or if your body didn't have androgen receptors to accept a hormone wash, and maybe you are a male-bodied individual, we all kind of had the same parts to start with. So embryologically, there are a lot of similarities between male female bodies. But this is just to highlight the fact that it's highly innervated in the clitoris, in the and just to look at the different parts there. So I'm going to keep moving along. I'm not going to go too much, but it is important. I'm not going to talk about the reproductive systems, menstrual cycle, or role of hormones right now, but I do offer a course that covers these topics, and you can always talk to me specifically about any of these items as well. In the interest of time, we're going to leave these for another occasion and move into shame-free sexuality. So it's only weird if you make it weird or if someone else made it weird for you. So thanks very much to society and our families and our religions and everything else that makes us who we are for possibly making it weird, right? If you are able to speak the anatomically correct terms for body parts, with your family, wonderful. That is not the case for many people. For example, I didn't even mention the fact that from the outside of a female-bodied individual, what you would see in the genitals area, we typically call the vulva, right? The vagina is a tube that's internal. And so to use anatomically correct, proper words is really good practice. We don't want to be using slang words, especially when we're educating our children, because it kind of can take away the seriousness, and you may miss communication. If you call it a cookie and then somebody says, "Oh, somebody touched my cookie today," you may actually forget that cookie means a private part in your secret code language. And so sure, you may want to have a pet name for your genitalia, that's fine, but to be comfortable with and able to use the correct anatomical terms is recommended. So when it comes to shame-free sexuality, where do we store that shame? Any guess what the sex master sex organ is? Da 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 da! It's the brain. The brain is in control of many functions related to our sexuality. So, experiencing shame-free sexuality is about reframing narratives, embracing your new unique sexual identity, and fostering self-compassion. So we can cultivate shame-free relationships with our sexuality by reflecting on and possibly rewriting your sexual script. You can practice self-acceptance and body positivity and promote open communication in your relationships. One of the main concerns my clients often bring up relates back to the brain, and that is intrusive thoughts. So this is a really text-heavy slide here. Bottom line is that intrusive thoughts are so common. They occur in individuals across sexual orientations and relationship statuses. Sometimes it's just a thought that pops in and then disappears. Other times it can be really, really distracting and distressing, and they can persist. So, a few different things to keep in mind is that if you feel stuck in your head, then this kind of chatter that's going on in your brain is a great way to interrupt your access to pleasure and orgasm. So we want to address it. You want to make sex better by prioritizing, and I'm probably in the way of this on the slides, but you want to prioritize psychological well-being and have open communication about your sexual experiences. The suggestions when it comes to intrusive thoughts. We want to identify and challenge these negative beliefs as they pop up so you can catch, cancel, and correct, right? Catch that negative thought, cancel it, tell yourself, no, that's not true, and then replace it with a correct or more positive and encouraging kind of a thought. Something that you might say to a friend, for example. There are a variety of other techniques listed on this slide. Again, it's pretty text heavy. Getting present, doing some sensate focus, maybe doing some reading, watching, or listening just to distract yourself out of being in your head. You don't want to be doing spectatoring, which is kind of like as if you're feeling like you're up in the corner of a room looking down on yourself when you're in a sexual experience, right? You want to be embodied so that you have access to your pleasure. So if you need to, you could always seek guidance from a therapist who might help you with some cognitive behavioral therapy, or see a sexuality professional. I may be able to help you as well. So a therapist can help to explore underlying factors that might contribute to your intrusive thoughts. So, moving away from the shame-free sexuality segment and into the self-exploration and pleasure, we've got some thoughts on the most important relationship you have is the one you have with yourself. Okay. So, I would love to encourage every person I meet to get curious and explore their own body. Establishing a healthy pleasure practice, some mindful touch, and sensory awareness might be a great place to start. To learn about your arousal patterns and then to realize that pleasure is your responsibility, not a partner's. Your pleasure is not something that they box up and hand to you as if it's some type of gift. It's something you need to work toward on your own and have open communication around. And so a couple of ideas for establishing a healthy pleasure practice could be to explore your body without a goal. Maybe you try some mirror exercises. Grab a hand mirror and take a look at what your body looks like. Getting comfortable with the body that you inhabit is one of the first steps to accessing the pleasure that's available in that body. And then to incorporate some mindful breathing. There are a number of breathing techniques. Maybe you could look up box breathing. I personally enjoy breathing in for the count of 5. Once I'm at the top of my breath, I pause, take an extra sip of air, and then exhale, maybe to the count of 7, letting the shoulders come down. Once you think all the air is gone, one extra little push before inhaling again. And doing that 3 times, for example, with your feet on the ground, can just really help to get you in your own body and release any tension. You could also stick out your tongue. Apparently, sticking out your tongue for 5 seconds can help to reduce your cortisol levels and reduce stress. Exploring with sensation, get curious, play with temperature, pressure, texture, note what you like, also note what you don't like. Try in different areas. Now, we don't need to always be focused on the genitals. You can be doing this from head to toe. You can do it systematically in a body mapping exercise, or you could stick with one area and maybe give yourself a good hand massage. See how that feels. Set the mood with some music and dim lighting, maybe a candle. Something that feels good for you. And then understanding your arousal patterns. So identify your accelerators and brakes. Emily Nagoski, who's an amazing research scientist on sex, she wrote a book called Come As You Are, and she details in that book about the accelerator and the brakes. She talks about different ways to become aware of what triggers your accelerator and what triggers your brakes. You can also use journaling to increase your self-awareness and experiment with some pleasure products. I used to have an online shop. I may bring some things back again in the future, but the technology is ever changing. There are things that vibrate, things that blow and suck air. There are water, like shower heads. There are penis toys. There are anal toys. There are vaginal toys. There are a variety of goodies that you can play with to get to know yourself, get to know what you like. I do suggest that you don't stick to the same thing all the time because that can form something called habituation, which means that you're only accessing your pleasure through one way and it becomes difficult to access your pleasure through other means. There are other enhancements, things like having a water-based lubricant, maybe a massage candle, some nipple clamps. Who knows? Maybe some sexy matching undies could just be what you need to feel really good about yourself and for yourself. Okay, so we're still in the self-pleasure topic and now moving more into the building of intimate relationships. We've got here an excerpt from Come Together, which is another Emily Nagoski book. This one here, she says, the science taught me three essential characteristics of couples who sustain connection over the long term. None of them were the characteristics you might guess. The three characteristics of partnerships that sustain strong sexual connection are one, they are friends, or to put it more precisely, they trust and admire each other. Two, they prioritize sex. That is, they decide that it matters for their relationship. Instead of accepting other people's opinions about how they're supposed to do sex in their partnership, they prioritize what's genuinely true for them and what works in their unique relationship. So, building intimate relationships, um, a lot of people who want to work on their relationship often come to me asking if they're normal. They ask, oh, is this normal? Is that normal? And I tell them normal is just a setting on the washing machine. Because in this book here, Sexual Intelligence by Dr. Marty Klein, he identifies what's normal, meaning common, typical, accepted as the way things are. So he says this is what normal sex actually looks like. It is awkward and self-conscious. Communication is limited. Neither partner laughs or smiles much. One or both partners are obsessively concerned about their performance. One or both are unsure of what their partner likes. One or both tolerate what they dislike, hoping it will stop soon. Perhaps he believes that her orgasm problem reflects on him. Maybe she believes that his erection problem reflects on her. I mean, of course, there are different ways that relationships look. It's not always a him and a her, but sex is sometimes physically painful, and sometimes masturbation is kept secret. So, normal is not what we're aiming for, okay? We want to strive for authentic and unique and extraordinary sex, right? We don't want what's sexually normal. And we want to normalize that sex does not only consist of penis and vagina intercourse. Of course, there will be such thing as penis and vagina intercourse, but if we were just going to associate sex with that type of a penetration, then probably we're not all having a great time doing it because a lot of female-bodied individuals are not experiencing orgasm from penetration alone. And expanding your definition of what sex is or means will only increase your access to pleasure and shared positive experiences. So, when I titled this section Building, I did it on purpose because we don't typically have just the one, and then you enter that relationship and everything is wonderful from there on out. No, relationships are a daily choice. And I encourage couples to get curious and explore, to prioritize open and honest communication, to create shared rituals for connection, and to cultivate individual and shared exploration. I read something once that 12 novel experiences in the span of 1 year is a good goal to set. So that's kind of like once a month to do something different. That doesn't mean to get into some ostrich positions in bed or, it could. That could be something that's novel that you would try, but it could be as simple as going to a restaurant you've not experienced. Maybe go to a place of the world you've never been before. Maybe vacation sex is great, going away and doing something outside of the norm. Okay, so having a few novel experiences is that's a nice way to explore. And so discussing desires, boundaries, and expectations, going back to those accelerator and brakes that we talked about wanting to figure out for yourself, now is the time to share what turns you on, what turns you off, what brings your interest in sexuality to a sharp halt. The brakes can be pretty sensitive for some folks. And then to use I statements to express your feelings and your desires. And then practicing active listening. So I have a number of strategies that I use with clients and I share with them as part of their homework for improving their relationships. And so if you're interested in working with me, again, you can head to the sexualityclinic.com and book in to see me. So I can tailor strategies to you based on what I've learned over the many years of studying human sexuality that I have experience with. creating shared rituals, having shared language, small daily gestures. This can strengthen intimacy. Non-sexual touch builds trust and closeness. Please include non-sexual touch. Most couples who are in sexless relationships have had an experience where touch means somebody wants something, and so it becomes avoided. If you can be touched just because the feeling of being touched is interesting and beautiful for one individual and or both, and that it can stop, then that's great. One strategy I often use for people who are in sexless relationships is I tell them to take sex off the table because then it reduces that pressure. And so then if they encounter, like if they get intimate, that it would include everything except penetrative sex. Okay, and you can get creative with different ways to express your interest in one another. And then, of course, to experiment with sensory play. And so, cultivating shared sexual exploration is also a great way to be connected in building intimate relationships. Like I mentioned before, the introducing of new experiences, creating a judgment-free space and some shared language, maybe setting a safe word, maybe kind of having some way to share to your partner that you're missing them. I personally say that my Tim tank is empty. I say that to my husband so that he knows, like, hey, she wants some connection time. Sometimes, it's just a matter of having some language that nobody gets defensive around, right? So remember that you are responsible for your own pleasure, though. But it does help if you have a partner that's invested in your pleasure. So, just as I wrap up here, encouraging someone to be entirely themselves is the loudest way to love them. I've got a few resources to share. Sizzling Sex for Life is a great resource that covers a whole host of studies. It summarizes about, I think it was like 2,500 studies done over the past 80 years on human sexuality. That's a long listen, but it's quite scientific and I really enjoyed it. I like audiobooks. These are all available by audio. Come As You Are or Come Together, great resources. And then Sexual Intelligence was one of my early reads, one of my faves. So thanks for hanging out with me while I went through my slides here. And then I've got sort of, these are the topics I often focus on. I offer professional neurodivergent affirming talk-only sessions for individuals and partnerships. Sessions are client-centered, future-focused, and science-informed. I provide a supportive space to explore sexual health and intimacy. Some of the reasons why people come to see me include body confidence and connection to self, sex and intimacy communication, pleasure education, desire and arousal difficulties, any dysfunctions. And yeah, there's a little QR code on the screen here that you can book to see me at. There is a 15-minute complimentary consultation offer that you're welcome to take advantage of. Otherwise, you can book straight in for anywhere from 30 minutes to 60 minutes or 90-minute sessions. 30 is a bit short, so I would suggest booking for 60 or 90, especially at the start. And that sort of wraps me up for today. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'll just remind you that my name is Roxana. I'm a clinical sexologist. I see individuals for a whole host of reasons, and I would love to remain connected. Please do pop into my emails if you'd like at roxana@thesexualityclinic.com. But until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and always prioritize your pleasure. I'm Roxana Smallwood, and this is the Sexuality Clinic Podcast.